I gasped audibly and gave surrender to a stiff, troubled shudder after, in the detail, the devil was related. A cold gravity drained my stomach downward with sinking weight, such as I've rarely known before, as though the adversary's irreconcilable corruption was made a little clearer, his wickedness characterized now more completely, which implied also the prospective consequence of its ruthlessness. I thought about the atrocity the whole way to the plasma place, formulating my most poignant tone, I guess. I spent half of my hour, or so, at the center, at least, typing on my phone a text to myself expressing my thoughts on the matter. The intake technician decided that I needed a more thorough examination to determine my eligibility, therefore I had time to type. The lobby was more crowded than usual for the early hour. GDIF, and God damn it, it's Friday. I just hardly imagined what influx might be inspired by the weekend's release, now only a day or an afternoon shift away. 10 people at least were standing in line when I walked in, waiting to be screened by a phlebotomist before being allowed to proceed with plasmapheresis. Friday offers double advantage to donating, I'm sure, insomuch that into the donor's pocket it puts a little bit of money, a very little, but dollars easily and guiltlessly devoted to drinking nonetheless. In the process, in depleting the plasma component, dehydrates the body, lowers blood sugar, and thins the blood's viscosity, all of which contribute to an easier inebriation, ingesting the alcohol purchased with profits from plasma prostitution. See? Double advantage. It takes a phlebotomy technician 5 to 10 minutes, high end and low, approximately, to process a returning donor. There were 2 currently scheduled to administer the task of the office. Between the 2 of them, I still waited several more than 30 minutes until I was next in line to be screened. One of the 2 phlebotomists, the one within view of the line, is a slender, effeminate homosexual. I want the other one, whoever else among the staff it may be. I've seen the gay one here several times before. He's spurned that I have no inclination to make eyes with him, or to return his glances, or to meet his entreating eyes at all. He's even performed my screening before, twice. His haughty, practiced mannerisms become rigid, concentrated, and he's too loudly cerebral with me in the room. His presence becomes how a pretty girl might behave around me, and I around her, if she and I found ourselves in the same intimate, yet sterile context. Cognizant and composed, and careful, mindful of her every movement in front of me, and conscious of mine every too in response to her, and me intuitive to her vice versa, and her showing that she knows it, and isn't trying to be coy or hide her posing from my inspection, for she expects to be surveyed, and should, for that bright things are beheld like light, and objects that shine attract the sight of many eyes within their space. And she studies my observation of her that I silent show. That's how the gay guy is with me. It's embarrassing for both of us. And this is America. People don't come here for the authentic cuisine, but to dissociate, to reappropriate, to homogenize wholly and half culture. That's why people come here, to not need to know their neighbors, or engage in neighborhood, or coalesce into community, but dwell as individual cells of no distinct organ. I can't tell if that's because older, more specific, heterogeneous societies of the old worlds, everywhere else the world over, whether they're more severe, or because modern mankind is more selfish. Likely both. Such disengaged homogeny, though, has contributed to a caudal American sentiment, and petty between the demographics. A daycare mentality, a feel to society like, "Mom, tell him to stop looking at me." A people of emotions that lack outlet, and opinions without insight, experts of trivial rubbish. a nation of tattletales, whiny bitches, and sniveling fogs. Confronters of bullies decades later as soldiers of their kids' battles, calling the principal because another child teased their child, and this is a very serious matter, and appropriate actions must be taken. Hashtag my kid's special and I am too. Hashtag and we both matter more than you. Hashtag mommy and daddy don't touch each other. Hashtag or look each other in the eye. Hashtag my kid's in middle school. Hashtag emotionally so am I. Hashtag I hate my life. Hashtag it's pointless too. Hashtag indirectly blaming you. Hashtag imposing my discontent on others. Hashtag looking for reasons to be angry, offended, and upset. Hashtag and something to complain about. Hashtag no merit to what I say. Hashtag validating my void day. Hashtag bitching all my time away. Hashtag my Americana. Hashtag state of the United States. Hashtag all is meaningless. Hashtag everything is dumb chaos. Hashtag American is apple pie. Hashtag if they're type and they are neither quick or dead, and their life never alive, however shall their virus die. During the 2016 presidential election, too, the legal definition of gender pronouns and transgender bathroom bullshit and other similar nonsense became hot topics and relevant issues, as at the same time the oceans are dying from plastic poison. Hashtag enough said. Because that after the Don Duck and the Disney rat got goofy, and they kept it up in the treehouse but on the down low, and ABC is an Asian ladle stirring the pot and a race card that separates blind hate in the room, and Fox is the other half of two, and CBS is the violent conservative alternative to NBC's corrosive cultural warfare by means of sexual reference, to eventually normalize every sexual impulse and weird fetish and sordid desire, and so undermine all notion of God and decency like lascivious laissez-faire. And collectively together, they've convinced morons by the million scores, the same people stupid and useless enough to watch, let alone be influenced by daytime television, which demographic of programmed non-thoughts as a percentage of the general population has been on the sharp and steady rise every decade since the inception of television. Made them all to believe that we all need to care right now about the excretion rights of a fringe liberal minority above common sense, that we need to impose precarious circumstance upon public place and restructure society to accommodate transgender identity crisis, when we could just institute and henceforth mandate a third restroom. But instead of some hideous, insidious scheme unfolding itself so that 2 years from now, perverted old men might have legal precedent under the guise of self-actualization that allows them to piss in public restrooms next to little girls in the adjacent stalls and listen to their little private parts tinkle while they, too, impose upon the little girls the sound of their skin smacking and their heaves hastening as they flub their ugly chubs. Which hideous things to hear hold all the real horror and the truer trauma of little girls' nightmares. But all because some mother's son was bullied in the boys' bathroom, and rather than instructing him to stick up for himself and face his fear, his mother, obtuse to the real root of the problem, and apathetic toward, or negligent regarding, or incapable of any extensive investigation or discernment, or both, or all, she then called the principal and demanded that her son be treated how he feels on the inside and who, on the outside, he feels he was supposed to be, and that her son be allowed to use the same restroom and together with the girls of his grade. Even though I've long figured and still feel the real me royal, but where's my goddamn crown? And so that they should be dissuaded from protest, moronic modern femininity has been convinced that every girl needs to have a gay guy for a friend, that homosexual men are all wise, snappy sages, unique flowers just trying to be themselves but have never been allowed, and that they're incapable of malicious or devious motive, and all which every woman can trust because they're not trying to have sex with her, yet who, notwithstanding, is trying to suck her husband's dick, secretly behind her back, to then likely blackmail him or as one in our dismal day of dark decay should only assume should soon ensue, unto some more and more devious submission. And she shouldn't, with her gay guy friend, let her teenage son be left alone. As also her teenage daughter shouldn't be left alone with the mother's male friend, a heterosexual, or with her uncle either. And so that she shouldn't hear her husband, and that she should dismiss, too, the sentiments of her father regarding her special child who deserves every special sympathy and encouragement and patience and accommodation and advantage and expression in the whole world, along with everyone else's consideration and sensitivity, and tough love be damned, to pursue whatever special path and to be who and whichever special person that they want to be. Modern motherhood has been made to believe, too, by pseudo-feminism, that everyone's sexuality needs not only be accepted but celebrated, and that any criticism of LGBT agenda is homophobic, to be interpreted and so subclassified as closet enclosure, desires in denial and repression and insecurity over one's own sexuality, or else as hateful inhumanity tantamount to Klansman inclination or a temperament towards Nazi-type atrocity. And women were persuaded, because the 20th century gave birth among manhood to generations of Jekylls only, and so it was plausible that every precept of her father's society was faulty or served to enforce some subtler controls and influences of his fascist fraternity, and therewith presumably, an ownership over her, and therefore was open to upheaval, because the fathers forever, and paternity as always imposed upon the daughters, then judged whatsoever repercussions she displayed ever, while all along, imagining his own moral authority enough to define when life begins in her body, portend persuasion over her birth control, and challenge her choice to keep conception, as though the penis ego was ever held accountable for its choices. And some time after the World Wars, breast cancer becoming big business, VHS pornography, and institutional pedophilia maintained still as yet, and ever, at its always flourishing rate, at some point the hypocrisy of the fathers became too much for the daughters to bear, and all notion of sexual discretion or normality or male-imposed morality became null and void, and her sexuality, having always been thrust upon her, and she herself then censured if she should ever show it or speak about it in any public way, suddenly became her only viable and most powerful voice, specifically because masculinity has always prior disallowed it, that the daughters, now the mothers, refused to reproach their own children at all in the expression of their sexual identity, and as silent partners, the fathers are only too happy to oblige. Because what were the boomers all up in arms about? Or did they know that women's lib included yoga pants? And they love Title IX and volleyball games at the grade school. And spandex shorts go well with 10-year-old girls and are part of the uniform. And middle schoolers feel pressures over relationship status, and young people feel special and unique the more hyphens they identify in their sexual orientation. And 12-year-old boys come out of closets that most were probably never in, but they simply have no concept of social repercussions, nor can appreciate that childhood discretions don't disappear in the digital age, and they have little relationship with a father figure, and they're desperate for pubescent attention and validation, and they're willing to suck dick to obtain them. And the current state of discourse regarding sexuality is so ridiculous that, with many expansive preliminary paragraphs, I must digress and generalize present anthropology, lest, in my aversion toward the gay phlebotomist at the Plasma Center, you should only hear hate speech. I ask women, though, well, attractive women, for who would better know? How behave most men once he becomes aware that she has not those feelings for him, or if she should rebuff his advances or despise him undesirable to her? Okay, so now that same passive-aggressive pettiness, the more than proclivity, the perfect happiness to employ whatever power within his capacity to so at all hinder or negatively impact that person who rejected him, apply it to my situation and the present predicament of heterosexual masculinity. Except women, after a vigorous morning workout, rather than going in disheveled, she doesn't have to shower naked and vulnerable with vampires of dawn, nor is she isolated in her locker room away from the witness of camera surveillance, and after straining her neck no less, for averting her eyes so long to the floor, as I must, in order to avoid eye contact with her version of homosexual, and so giving violence reason to resent. That in prison I showered within mere feet and my back toward my potential assailants, yet never have I felt I more risked my own rape by a secret subculture of sodomites than I have showering in the men's locker room on a Saturday evening during the hours of operation after sunset at my gym in Oswego, Illinois. And something corrupt crawls quiet and creeps lurking among these counties around Kendall. And be advised, and enter Aurora at your own risk.